Before Watergate, there was once a time in America when the presidency was held in near reverence, not immune to criticism, but cloaked in a kind of moral authority. In the years following World War II, the United States saw itself as a beacon of democracy and global leadership. Its institutions, Congress, the courts, and especially the White House, were sturdy, trusted, and widely respected. By the early 1972, the nation was weary. The 1960s had left scars. The assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy, the long battle for civil rights, student protests, and cities in flames. Yet amid this unrest, most Americans still believed in the system. They believed, perhaps naively, that power was constrained by honor. President Richard Nixon, a Cold War veteran and political strategist, was not universally loved, but he was respected. To many, he represented order in a time of disorder. He governed from a place of calculation, not charisma, and to a shaken country that seemed like a steady hand. The Vietnam War, however, told a different story. Televisions flickered nightly with images of body bags, burning villages, and confused soldiers caught in a war with no end. Though leaders insisted victory was near, a secret report, later known as the Pentagon Papers, revealed a decades-long pattern of deception. Still, Americans largely clung to the belief that if their leaders made mistakes, those mistakes weren't malicious, they were born of judgment, not deceit. The media was cautious. Anchors like Walter Cronkite spoke with measured gravity. Newspapers respected the presidency, rarely suggesting outright corruption. Journalists investigated but rarely accused. In 1964, nearly 80% of Americans trusted the federal government to do the right thing most of the time. That trust was not just political, it was cultural. But all of that would begin to unravel in the early hours of the 17th of June, 1972. The Watergate scandal, a story of a break in that brought down a president. It began quietly, in the middle of the night. On the 17th of June, 1972, 5 men were arrested while breaking into the Democratic National Committee headquarters tucked inside the Watergate office complex in Washington, D.C. They weren't typical burglars, they carried sophisticated surveillance gear and stacks of cash. And as the story unraveled, what at first seemed like a clumsy robbery would become one of the greatest political scandals in American history. At the time, Richard Nixon was running for re-election. He had already built a reputation as a savvy, calculating politician. Behind the scenes, his campaign had created a secret team of operatives nicknamed the Plumbers, whose job was to stop leaks of embarrassing or classified information and sabotage political opponents. The Watergate break-in was part of that operation. The men had broken into bug phones, steal documents, and gather intelligence, all in the name of helping Nixon win. But the burglars were caught. And though the White House denied any involvement, 2 young Washington Post reporters, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, weren't convinced. Following a trail of anonymous tips, including one from a mysterious source known only as Deep Throat, they uncovered a web of corruption, hush money, and dirty tricks that reached all the way to the Oval Office. Meanwhile, inside the government, the investigation deepened. The FBI, the Senate, and a special prosecutor began digging. One revelation after another shook the nation. Secret slush funds, illegal wiretaps, forged documents. Then came the bombshell. There were tapes. Nixon had secretly recorded every conversation in the White House. When asked to turn over those tapes, Nixon refused. He claimed executive privilege, but the courts disagreed. In a dramatic 1974 Supreme Court ruling, the justices ordered him to hand them over.
I'm sorry.
The tapes revealed Nixon's voice calm, confident, orchestrating the cover-up, discussing how to obstruct justice, and directing payoffs to silence witnesses. His political allies began to desert him. Impeachment loomed. And on the 8th of August, 1974, facing certain removal from office, Richard Nixon resigned, becoming the first and only U.S. president to do so. His final words to the nation were simple: "I have never been a quitter, but as president, I must put the interest of America first." After Watergate, rebuilding the damaged system, the nation was stunned. Confidence in government had collapsed. What was once unthinkable had happened. The president had broken the law and tried to cover it up. But from the ashes of Watergate rose a wave of reform. Congress passed sweeping legislation to limit executive power. The Office of Government Ethics was created. Inspectors general were installed across federal agencies. Campaign finance was regulated. And the Public Integrity Section within the Department of Justice was founded to prosecute public corruption. The word Watergate became shorthand for scandal, secrecy, and systemic failure. But it also stood as a testament that American democracy, while flawed, had the capacity to correct itself. Can Watergate survive the Trump era? In the years following Watergate, the institutional legacy endured. Guardrails held until they didn't. By the time President Donald Trump entered his second term, many of the protections born from the scandal were under siege. Inspectors general were fired in rapid succession, some in apparent violation of new protections passed in 2022. Trump defied the Impoundment Control Act, a law passed after Nixon to prevent presidents from withholding funds. Now, even the Public Integrity Section, a direct product of the Watergate reforms, stands on the brink of elimination. Legal scholars describe the moment not as political turbulence, but as an assault on the post-Watergate architecture. The question looming over Washington is simple and existential. Can the very mechanisms meant to prevent another Nixon survive an era defined by defiance? A familiar shadow. In 2024, Trump was indicted over hush money payments meant to conceal damaging information before an election, a move reminiscent of Nixon's cover-up strategy. The methods had changed. The playbook had not. The line between law and politics blurred. Trump, unlike Nixon, claimed not guilt, but persecution. He branded investigations as witch hunts, painted journalists as enemies, and cultivated a movement that celebrated his resistance to norms rather than condemned it. Meanwhile, the memory of Watergate began to fade. To younger generations, it became a distant scandal, diluted in documentaries and textbooks. And with that fading memory came a chilling risk that the lessons of Watergate could be forgotten. The age of impunity. The media landscape today is unrecognizable compared to the 1972. What was once a shared national conversation is now a fragmented battlefield. News is partisan, facts are contested, and political scandals are filtered through tribal loyalties. Observers wonder, could a scandal like Watergate topple a president today? Many doubt it. Some even argue that Trump has gone further than Nixon ever dared and yet has remained politically intact. In hindsight, Watergate may one day seem not like a turning point, but a lost opportunity to draw a line in the sand. The final question: will the spirit of Watergate endure? Does the Watergate legacy still hold? Yes, but it's under relentless pressure. Are Trump's scandals comparable? In key ways, yes. The echoes of obstruction, secrecy, and abuse of power are undeniable. Could another Watergate bring down a president today? Not without bipartisan consensus, something increasingly rare. So, can Watergate survive? Technically, yes. The offices, agencies, and laws still stand. But in practice, the values behind them, accountability, transparency, public trust, are being eroded. Whether they survive